Ready?
Uh-huh. I've seen you wearing that here.
I've worn it constantly.
That's right.
I love that because I imagine you get a lot of people saying nonviolence just isn't realistic.
They don't say anything, but
Oh, yeah.
apparently everybody's read it. All the deputies that I was around, because I was there. And
Jane, maybe you could, first of all, I guess we don't have your last name. Tell us your name and where you're from.
I'm Jane Gapin from the Florida Keys, Lower Keys. And I live with Barbara.
Okay, and you were one of the women who was marching on the day of the Waterloo incident, but you weren't arrested and you became a support person subsequently for the women who were arrested. What did you do as a support person?
Well, we hung around, and we were in circles too. At the courthouse, these circles were kind of chaotic because they're the bystanders and the townies were very distracting, and sometimes they would make a lot of noise. Sometimes later on they came up right in back of us and made such noise it was hard to talk to each other. But we were constantly being reported to from the inmates and their lawyer, and from Shad, who represented the central HQ here. And gee, we didn't know what was going to happen. You know, there was a possibility that they might be released. So we were waiting for that and for more news. And I haven't even had a chance to sit down and try to form a log about it. In any case, I sensed that they were not going to be released, because later that night I was watching the charging, which they did separate, one at a time, and I was in the basement. And they read their the charge, the content of the charge, which ended up with being disorderly conduct, but it was there was disobeying the sheriff and inciting to riot, all kinds of stuff like that. And I just saw no indication that they were going to back down. There was some guys sitting over at a table, and one of them turned out to be the DA, and one of them was a county commissioner. And you know, they just were watching, just make sure this was being done.
There's one thing I wanted to ask you about the process that the support people went through. I think it's very interesting that there was such a direct parallel between what happened at Interlaken when the support people were waiting outside the school to show support for the women inside, and what had happened at Waterloo, where once again the townspeople were confrontational with the women, and the women had to make a decision whether to stay or go. How did that process work at Interlaken?
Well, it wasn't invented for this occasion. It's something we do all the time, you know. We do it in workshops and whatnot. We do it in consciousness raising. You've probably done it yourself, huh?
Yep.
Right. So there's nothing new about it. The thing is that we did all want to talk at once, so at that point we had a facilitator, and she would say, come on now, let's focus. In fact, it was Kim, the giant, who you may have seen. And let's focus now, we have to focus now. And I tended to burst into, and I controlled myself. But we would tend to go around, what did we make of this latest information? What should we do? As it turned out, I think at the courthouse, sitting around, I did a certain amount of mingling with the crowd, because I did that at the bridge, and I felt it was important to do. And when I went back, and it was getting more like dusk, the problem was, should we continue the march? There was a chance of continuing the march. And I thought, oh gosh, I bet they would love it inside if we did that. Some of my concerns were, what would they want us to do? Because our best brains and most experienced people were in jail. And some of us, I think we did feel a little at a loss. We weren't prepared to be a support group any more than they were prepared to be jailed. So that problem, go back to answer your question, which was, say it again.
I'm trying to figure out what process developed. I'm sure it was somewhat based on what people have been doing here and elsewhere, but also, as Barbara was saying, a certain kind of reinvention has to go on, or an organic growth in process of how to decide decisions at crucial moments.
It worked much more like the way she described it at Interlaken the day before they were released, when we had a very large circle. Very large. I figured it was almost as large as yours. And we all had candles, and we were beginning to get cold. And then it was decided that some wanted to stay and some wanted to go. And we decided into 2 circles. But all along the way, and also we listened. We made the sergeant get into the center so we could all hear. We didn't negotiate with him with a team or anything. We all wanted to hear what he said, and he told us, the school board is going to arrest you after a certain time. And we said, well, we'll get a warning. Yes, you get a warning. So then, that's when Andy told us other things which may have been less important, or I can't think of them. But the point was that some of us definitely wanted to stay, and they did. And the process was working with a facilitator, and we were very distracted, and we tended to interrupt each other. And Kim would say, "Now let's focus again." And we were getting stuff that was partly rumor, and we were getting it sifted through shad. The one thing we were very concerned with, we knew we were getting messages from inside that they didn't want to be separated. And then we heard that they were going to be moved. And we knew we shouldn't believe the sheriff. And we wanted to know where they were going to be moved. So we were determined to stay till we found out. And then, even then, I think we had to figure, they're going to be moved. And one of the clues was that they got out this enormous paddy wagon, backed it out around to where they could be ushered in, you see. Now, it was getting very late. Some of us, by the way, had come back to the camp, leaving a small vigil. And when we came back, they left for a while, and we replaced them, and they began to grow, it seems to me. Now, something very crucial as I look back upon it was a difference of outlook, that this perhaps we should call in many more of us, you see, at this point. And then again, maybe not. Now, somebody put it yesterday in a very, very simple way. There was always this difference, and it came from the depot action, which was going to happen, you see. They really didn't want to be distracted from this. And so there was a lot of discouragement over that. And we were not unanimous either. And there was discussion about that within the circle.
So what happens when a decision isn't unanimous and consensus, people try to achieve unanimity?
Some people act unilaterally, and that's why the circle kept growing, because we say, hey, look, we think this is important, come on, you know. And then, of course, there was a central core of us who really wanted to know what was happening to our friends, even on a personal level, even without thinking of strategy. We just did want to know. That was, of course, support group type of thing. But we did feel that we felt at a loss.
That's one aspect of consensus, or one objection people raise to consensus, is that if unanimity can't be reached, then either people will act unilaterally or no decision is made at all. Do you think there is an adequate way, does the consensus process have a way to deal with a lack of unanimity?
I guess that was it, unilateral action, yeah.
And you think that is the best way or the only way to deal with it?
Oh, no. I think perhaps we should have tried to have unanimity, but I don't think we could under these circumstances. I did hear I don't know whether I should mention this or not. Maybe you should ask me privately.
Okay. Also, another thing I wanted to ask you about was August 1st. You were a marcher on August 1st, even though your good friends were still being held in the prison. But what kind of feeling did you have demonstrating on August 1st when you knew that there were other people who were still in jail?
We'd gotten word from them that they'd be doing their own thing, and I could almost picture them leaping about and singing and doing all sorts of comparable things because their hearts were in it too, you know. So I didn't feel that I was neglecting them. And there was nobody out there then, were there? We were all at the march, weren't we? Yeah.
And when you were in the march, what kind of spirit did you get from the women on August 1st?
Wow. Well, it was go, go, go. There was no doubt that we were going to do this thing. And we had to form over at Sampson Park in the drizzle. A lot of people had raincoats, and I got a sort of plastic bag that was working all right, but it was very drizzly, and yet it was so cheerful. And after a while we began to sing and forming circles within circles. And before we actually went out, again, a big circle was formed, and it whirled, you know, into a vortex and started back again. I wish I could remember some of the songs. And it was very colorful, you know. I had a sign for a while, but the Bread and Puppet took it back. They were out in front most of the parade. And there were a lot of banners. I also walked near a thing that was a kind of makeshift. Really, it was the funniest looking missile I ever saw, but they carried it very carefully. All the way it was falling apart, its stuffing was falling out. Yeah, they carried it all the way.
Do you think that the mood changed? At Sampson State Forest, I remember there was a very cheerful mood despite the rain. There was a lot of dancing and singing. I think as people got closer to where the action was going to happen, maybe the level of apprehension raised. For one thing, there were a lot more police officers, and the townspeople were there. Did you sense a change in mood as people approached the fence?
We'd picked up the rumor that there were townies on both sides of the road. This was from one of the media guys, and he said to me, I'm a good estimator, and I think it's 700 or 800. He said, but they're not all against you. And I said, what proportion? Well, maybe 20% is for you. Now, so I passed that along, but nobody seemed terribly excited or interested in this. And the stoppages, when we stood around for long times, you know, we knew that the negotiating was going on. We didn't know exactly what it was. There was a great kind of an irritation that we were going so slowly. We knew there must be reasons because we learned about the deputies. But then, of course, there were loads and loads of people who knew nothing about this. But believe me, I don't think they were being apprehensive. We were just too many. And I've thought since, especially listening to Barbara, I don't see how the townies could have disturbed us. They would have been overwhelmed by this crowd of us, 2,000 or 3,000 compared to their just little or nothing.
150 or whatever.
Whatever it turned out. It's probably more. But when the state police entered into things, they pushed them back. They didn't want them. They saw that they thought there was a danger. Who knows? We thought that the sheriff's deputies were simply unable, completely unmotivated to protect us if needed. And they're not, and we weren't being very bright. Then, as it turned out later, the negotiating they were doing turned out to be just stopping us completely. That's what they really wanted. But there came a moment when the marchers began to go forward, and I heard somebody say, well, you should have seen the sheriff when he saw that. He just nearly jumped out of his skin in rage and frustration because they just poured on ahead. And by the time we got to the gateway, the hecklers were kept back by the state police, and we had most of the gate and no further.
What was your feeling when you saw the first women go over the fence?
Well, I tell you, I had seen the women dragged off at Lexington at Waterloo Bridge, and I watched for a while, and I simply couldn't didn't thrill me, frankly, and after a bit I moved back. I don't like crowds. I don't like to feel too crowded, and I was tired by that time. But when I watched it on your film, I was thrilled. So I wasn't there to watch every moment of this. It just didn't, that wasn't even why I was there in a way.
Why were you there?
I wanted this wonderful parade to be there, and so the pillowcases and the other drama, the wailing and the screaming and all that. I'd been through that before at the Pentagon, and I thought these were good things to do. And I heard too that the moaning and groaning that we did was very disturbing to the onlookers. They couldn't handle that. It was too emotional. Maybe it was too emotional. Here they were cutting off some part of themselves in order to keep up this, as Barbara said, this demented thing. Nuke them till they glow, utterly demented thing. They couldn't handle the emotion of these groans and moans. And I felt that most of the people, including me, we were genuinely groaning. We were not faking it. And when I saw later on one of the films somebody who was acting it up, I resented it. I just kind of moaned, oh God, what one might do if you were watching the end of the world.
Yeah, we have some footage. You should see it sometime. Maybe we can show it here, of the same kind of moaning and wailing at the gate on the July 4th. And there's a close-up of the guard's face. It's a woman guard behind the fence as the moaning's going on. And I've never seen anyone look so disturbed as that guard did. And I guess that kind of symbolic action does have make an impression on people.
We've all had some imagination about what the end, it's too late now.
Do you fear that there will be a nuclear war in your lifetime? Do you believe that there will be?
I certainly fear it, but I fear it less. I fear it less.
Does this encampment make you fear it less?
Sure, you're damn right. Oh yes, this has made a big difference to me.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you spending the time to talk to us.
Oh, I appreciate being asked. And I had kind of wished that maybe you'd found somebody who was at the house during this crisis too.
During the Waterloo crisis?
Yeah, because we don't know
what went on back here.
We know that they were disturbed and distracted that this had happened. They wished it hadn't. I wished it hadn't happened too, but after a bit, hearing some of the others chipping in, my perspective changed. I knew it was a very important thing that had happened. Even though these saps, these demented, benighted hecklers, which were in minority, were getting their way, still, the whole event was not to be calculated, except that it was bigger than.
Well, maybe we should try to find somebody who was here back at the house. We were still on the road, and we called in. I don't know if...
I'm ready.
Could you tell me your name and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Elizabeth Holm. That's spelled with an S, not a C. That's my Swedish grandmother. I come from Pacific Grove, California.
Did you come all the way here from California for the encampment?
Yeah, I did.
That's amazing. What made you decide to come here?
Well, one thing was I wanted to be in women's space. I wanted to have that. And of course I did want to come for the peace academy for the action. I had been through the Livermore thing in California a little while before that, and ended up doing support for a group of people who went in thinking that they'd be out 2 days and they spent 11 days in Santa Rita jail. And I, through that time, was generating the feeling that I need to do this, I want to do this. And you can't really explain exactly why. It's just something about coming from the center of your being, that you have to be in a place you're not supposed to be and say how strongly you feel. So I was ready to do it when I came out, but I didn't really know that. It kind of happened on the day of the march.
So you didn't know beforehand that specifically you would be committing civil disobedience on August 1st?
When I woke up that morning, I started writing notes to people saying what should happen if I happen to get hung up for a week or something. And I left notes with people so that I was prepared to go in. That's what was going to happen. So I think one part of me was preparing and was perfectly aware of what I was going to do, and another part was acting as if it was any other day.
And did you join an affinity group that morning?
Well, a nice thing happened. There are a few women here who were from California that I'd known before. But I was in an affinity group, which was a peacemakers group, which was just formed the day before. I was very interested in peacemaking, so I went to the training, and in that workshop they said, form an affinity group. So my affinity group were being arrested the first time, which is a big deal, were women that I hadn't known for 24 hours. But I couldn't have felt more close to them. And I told them that I was concerned to be a peacekeeper. First of all, there had been trouble at the end of the march. I would not have gone in because I wanted to fulfill that function. But when things seemed to be going well, I told them I'm going to go in. And before I went over, they